All right, so blaming the audience is the ultimate bold plan cotton. Let's see how that works out for you. The Bros guy did it also. He said, I don't know, Middle America didn't see his movies, and you look at the results of his movies and the numbers. Like nobody saw your movie. Maybe a couple areas in Santa Monica, Santa Barbara, parts of the BLT zones. Like every San Francisco, every city's got their little zone. It's like yeah, okay, a couple of theaters saw it, but like New York alone, if they saw your New York, San Francisco, if the big city saw your movie, it would have been enough to put over the top. No, I'm gonna blame the million people in Montana who didn't see the movie. Okay, well, good luck with that. They weren't gonna see it anyway, and you know that. Blaming the audience is a weird flex, but I don't know. Maybe they hope nobody is gonna read the interviews or something. And technically, he goes, blames moviegoers for Buzzfeed Lightyear's box office bomb. And the thing is, technically, yeah, it's true. I guess it's sort of looking at one side of the coin and not the other. But yes, people did not pay for the movie. But it's like blaming somebody for not banging you, but they're in the other room and you won't even get up and brush your teeth and at least go in the other room and make yourself presentable. It's like half of anything is showing up. But this guy blames the science fiction narrative for the story and said, oh, people just weren't on board with that. Now, here's the thing with these softball interviews. Every interview now is a softball interview. Every single one. Nobody in the industry, because there's this incestuous relationship between Hollywood and the media, they never ask any hard questions. And if the interviewer even vaguely touches on something real about some of the concerns about people who said they didn't want to see the movie for these reasons or why it was banned in 15 countries as Chris Evans lost his mind over, they're not if they even bring that up, the guy will just go, oh well, those are trolls on the internet. Now, here's the thing. That argument would make sense. Trolls on the internet. Okay, so the movie was a massive success. So you're right. They were just trolls they're just people disagreed with you on the internet. Calling them trolls might be a little bit strong. But if the movie was a massive success, okay, well, you have the last laugh. But when the movie's not a massive success and you have these people who are, you're calling them trolls, but they're clearly explaining to you why they didn't see the movie. And yet you're still calling them trolls, but they didn't see the movie. The movie was a bomb. So that means they're not trolls. Those people are giving you some hints as to why they didn't see the movie. So are you going to bring up those concerns? No, because those concerns, the people didn't see the movie because of the cultural Marxist propaganda stuff, the BLT stuff, and the swapping of the characters and the diversity, all that kind of stuff. And they're not going to bring that up because the simple truth is they know people aren't on board with it, and they're going to keep doing it anyway because they're not making movies for money. These are not their motives, like the FBI talks about motives. Any human endeavor has got certain motives in it. Their motives are not pecuniary. They're not. You think, oh, articles of incorporation. They're Delaware Corporation, whatever they call it. They have a dogma to start the company. They're selling widgets and return on investment for the shareholders. All that stuff is BS. That's not what Hollywood is, and people have this fundamental misunderstanding. They legitimately think, oh, it's a publicly traded company. There's shares on the NASDAQ, and here's the ticker and here's the accounts. No. That's not. This is an ideologically motivated company. It's an entirely different belief system. And there's a lot of people on the left and the right who still don't get that. You go, so to believe otherwise is to think that these intelligent people are repeatedly making poor business decisions. Eventually, you're going to have a cognitive dissonance where you have to look at these people who are in charge of billion-dollar companies and trillion-dollar industries and think that they're incompetent because they're repeating behavior that results in losses and expecting a different result. Eventually, you're going to get to the point like, oh, it's really not a financially motivated corporate structure. They're motivated by something else. And then you look at what they're pushing, you go, oh, this appears to be what their motivation is, this identity politics, this almost religion of Bolshevism. And for some reason, getting people on the left and the right to that point, you present the clear evidence. It's like, here's Occam's razor. This seems to be their motivation. And you go, why is it so hard for people to just accept that? Like, the logic seems to point in this direction, but people shy away from that because it's an issue that has deeper roots and people just kind of don't want to explore it. But, sometimes you got to strap on that tinfoil hat and go exploring. So he's blaming the science fiction narrative. He said, people just weren't on board with that. It's like, are you going to mention the other criticisms of the movie? And at nowhere in the interview does he mention it. So why it bombed? Well, because the audience is not on board the BLT stuff. That's probably the main thing. The diversity is a secondary issue, but the BLT stuff I think is number primary, and then they swapped out the main character Tim Allen for Chris Evans. Chris Evans was in a bunch of movies, and he does fine. I don't think he doesn't have fans like Tim Allen has fans. It's a whole different. People see movies with Chris Evans in it, but they don't see Chris Evans movies. Or the reverse is true for Tim Allen. The thing is, it's a kids movie that people remember, I think, from the '90s, but now it's got all this BLT Q plus whatever G propaganda and diversity. Or maybe if I can be more charitable, I'll say they hate Hollywood's version of it, but now the audience has a learned stimulus response to it. Because, say you put a figurative gun to my head in the way of a briefcase full of money and said, hey, we want you to make this diverse storyline. I'd be like, all right. But I wouldn't turn people into purse puppies and Mary Sue's. They would be multifaceted like every other character. And I mean, that's just not acceptable in Hollywood. And people learn that. It's learned behavior. In Hollywood, if you see what we'll loosely call woke stuff, it's going to be a bunch of anti-white propaganda and purse puppies and Mary Sue's. And like literally, it's just as simple as if you see green or blue-eyed characters, they're going to be lectured to by the Pox characters. They're going to be talked down to. They're going to be somehow incompetent or stupid or malicious, cruel, conniving. Like every single time, the blonde and blue-eyed characters are just going to be the bad characters. It's like, well, there goes the willingly suspension of disbelief. And people slowly learn. I mean, it's so obvious now you'd have to be very far head in the sand to not notice this kind of stuff. So now we have certain associations, and we have woke, diverse PTSD. We get triggered by cringe when we see these pox walks, alternative lifestyles, and even that, it's like, oh, so it's alternative. So you're trying to sell this minor, the Venn diagrams of like what you're portraying, and then the potential audience is very slim. Why wouldn't you sell the mainstream? Like, well, these people exist. Yeah, but they're not the mainstream. And usually you want your target audience to be as big as possible, and you're deliberately foregoing that. And they're like, well, they should want to see this, but they don't. I mean, and it doesn't matter why they don't. Oh, well, they're istophobics, and we're winnowing down our audience to get rid of the istophobes. Okay, but that's not, like, you're not doing business. You're doing identity politics. You're doing ideological. You have an ideological motivation. So they call us istophobic for not wanting to see commie propaganda while they literally, fly to certain islands and do this kind of stuff. Most people hate all this stuff. Hollywood is living life in the clouds, just huffing their own queefs and, flying to those islands. And they're lecturing us on our morals. I mean, the whole thing's like, people are aware of this kind of stuff. Like, we know these aren't, far-right conspiracy theories. Oh, except it all actually happened. Oh, so it literally is just that clear. George Clooney at the awards show telling us to drive Priuses while they fly Lear jets to Paris for climate conferences. Or Greta takes a sailboat somewhere, but her crew flies around on jets to set things up. I mean, the whole thing is theater. Or then you look at the carbon footprints and water use of their mansions. It's as if they're giant hypocrites that say all these insane things because nobody calls them on it. They take limos, SUV suburban, full-size suburban limos to their private jets, and then like fly somewhere to give us a lecture. The whole thing is just insane. These are the same people who abuse men, women, and children in Hollywood, and they lecture us. Whatever message they support is evil. It's okay to just start being honest with them and say that the BLT diversity, the anti-white stuff is not what you want to see. Why on earth would we want to see it? Those are not our values, and we know how awesome European people are because we are them. Yes, they will call you a bunch of ad hominems, or let me say this. If you're going to criticize a group of people, you have to criticize every group of people, and you can't have sacred cows. Like, yes, it's okay to criticize people of European descent as long as you spread that to everyone, every single group, and of course you don't see that in Hollywood. In fact, obviously you never have. So, yeah, they'll call you a bunch of ad hominems, but it doesn't matter. You got to normalize saying these things. Don't say anything in the comments. YouTube knows all the dog whistles. And moving the window away from whatever direction they're going in. We have to get them comfortable with frank and sometimes harsh criticism and try to get them away from the childish personal attacks. And really, the thing with Twitter is, like, you just say your piece and then mute the conversation. Like on Twitter, the rule of thumb I had was like I'd say one thing, and then people come back, I'd have one rebuttal, and then I would just mute the entire thread. So let's take a look at some examples. Eternals, you're like, I didn't see Eternals. Yeah, that was probably part of the issue. Nobody saw Eternals. First of all, they had a bunch of race swap characters that were not from Kirby's comic. I think in the comic, the Eternals were all blonde, and then the humans were whatever the humans were, and then the what do you call the goblin creatures were whatever goblin creatures, whatever they called them. Kirby had a set narrative in mind about he made these because blonde is very very rare on Earth. So I believe he made all the Eternals blonde or red haired or something. But they swapped all those out for like some of the characters had disabilities and they're like super space powered robots. That doesn't make any sense. You can't do things like that. So the character is using sign language. I think were they using American Sign Language or something weird. But they're like robots or space gods, or they're very close to it. They're like I guess the equivalent of angels. Why would one guy be obese and why would one girl have to use sign language? They could probably communicate with their minds. None of this makes sense. And then why did you race swap them? Clearly you hate the people of the light. And then there was a scene where they had not just BLT dads of two different tribes, I think, but they had a kid. So how exactly does that work? Where's the mom? Did they buy a child and cut the mother out of her life? Children need their moms, dads, grandparents, and cousins. That is what we believe. I remember Ruben posted a picture on Twitter, and this was interesting because it was like the first time where there was a lot of pushback. He was with some guy, and they were holding this kid together, or twins together, and I think they were expecting a different response. They got like the mainstream con ops media, just the right wing glowing from orbit media, the Blaze Rebel Post Millennial Gateway Pundit, that media in quotes. Oh, it's so right wing. Yeah, not exactly. So they get on there and they congratulate Ruben and his friend for their kid that they bought. But like the real right wing and a bunch of left wing feminist chicks get on there and they go, so where's the mom? And they sort of get attacked by the left wing a little bit in the audience, but the left wing is not really on board with this thing either because they're asking really basic questions. They go, so where's the mom? Why isn't the mom in the kid's life? And you don't really have a good answer for that. So it was interesting. Ruben didn't get the response he wanted, and the left and the right was not on board with it, but the con ops right was on board with it. It's like I did a video for Odyssey and Bit Chute about a Gateway Pundit article that came out the other day. They take off the mask. They take off the mask and they let you know like they're not the right wing. So what are you guys actually conserving? Oh, nothing. We just move the narrative to the left, but a little bit slower. Yeah, that's kind of yeah. Anyway, so Hollywood believes different things, but Hollywood also worships Moloch and sacrifices children on that island. So then after this movie bombed, which keep in mind, bomb or not, they're probably still going to make a sequel because I think they need it in the continuity. But then they decided to keep putting BLT stuff in movies, and they put some in Buzzfeed Lightyear, and I think one of the Disney Star Wars movies had two women in a scene, but it was like they could clip it out really easy for China, I guess, because I actually don't remember that scene. But I mean, that was a hard movie to watch. You'd have to. The rewatchability of Disney Star Wars is zero. And prequels, that's probably pretty low too. So whenever they ad hominem us with, whatever they say, it doesn't matter because we don't want to see propaganda. It's moot because whatever they say, it's not going to change our mind. Oh, you called us marching around the Hugo Boss. Okay, well, I guess I'll change my mind. I'll go pay for your ticket now and go watch your movie instead of just going sailing for it. No, you didn't. Like an ad hominem does not help people. The movie companies, like they're their own worst enemy because they come out and they blame the audience. Like that Eichner guy for Bros, that was insane. If I was his buddy, I would have taken him aside. I said, "Give me your phone. Let's we're gonna go camping for 2 weeks and no cell phone for you. You're gonna go out there for 2 weeks and you're just gonna chill and you're just not gonna touch your phone for 2 weeks, friend, because you're just making everything worse right now." Anyway, so a lot of, it's not that people really have an issue with BLT people so much. I mean, some people do, which is, whatever. It's just that, like, why would we want to see it on screen? Why would we want to show kids this? Is probably the bigger issue. Kids are very susceptible to propaganda. That's why Hollywood puts all this stuff in the movie, even if they have to lose money to do it, because it's ideological motivation. It's not financial. They don't give a rat's tail about return on investment for companies that, if I remember right, pay dividends or increase share value. Somehow they're rewarding the shareholders for investing, using their company as an investment vehicle. Disney and these other Hollywood companies, Amazon, Warner Brothers, whoever else, they don't give two S's about that. And there's a deeper issue of stuff like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Larry Fink, using mutual funds to invest in these things. And it's really like there's a couple articles on Larry Fink and his power to control Hollywood. Like, most people look at, like, they don't even know how that works, and it's like, yeah, the media is pretty light on that kind of thing. Anyway, so it's an explanation about why you see a lot of stuff in movies that's not logical, stuff that clearly doesn't sell. It's like, well, if they're using mutual funds to invest in it, it's like there's so many trillions of dollars, they just don't care. So let me put this gently. People are not on board with this because people have different opinions about that sort of thing. You got to be honest about that. Like, if you discuss it with them, ask them if they can discuss the issue without straw men and ad hominems or deflection, because the odds are that they can't. You saw that interview with that Canadian guy about, so what you're saying is there's a bigger issue of the Disney stuff that went down in Florida, and I don't know how important that is to the bread and circuses, soy slop cattle who just want spandex-bound silly films to distract them from their crippling depression and anxiety. I think it's as simple as, if you hear there's two guys kissing in a movie, you just don't want to see it. It's just kind of this was an issue too. But I don't know how many people are this inside baseball on these issues about them talking about, the people who work at Disney are fully on board this kind of stuff. Some lady's in her 50s, and she's talking about, this other lady's in her 50s, and she's talking about her kids are all BLT and all, like, talking about your kids' preferences and that kind of stuff. And, like, you're in your 50s, so your 40s or 50s, I hope your kids are adults and they're in their 20s, because if they're not, and you're talking about them that way, and God, I hope you have their permission to talk about them that way, but it sounded like she had kids who were under 18. It was, God, the whole thing was so creepy that, what do you call that? Too much information? Like, people don't have the borders they used to have, where you just don't talk about people's kids. You don't talk about your own kids that way. You just leave them out of the discussion. And for the love of God, like, the idea of people talking about kids and things dealing with prurient interest. I mean, a lot of this is a slippery slope. I can't even discuss it on YouTube. It's just too many hot words. But I mean, this is like, where this is going. And anyway, so I think it's just simple. They hear this kind of stuff and they're like, oh, so it's got two dudes into each other. Yeah, I don't want to see that. And it doesn't matter what they say to you after that. That's the line in the sand, because that's your opinion based on a lifetime of experience. And also, it's like, this isn't the 90s where if Wesley Snipes or Robin Williams or who's that guy who was in Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze, they did some kind of BLT comedy movie. It's going to be a comedy, and it might portray the BLT community in the most positive light possible. I mean, obviously, you could make these movies today because those guys aren't BLT. Like, that movie is about as far as people will go because it's a comedy. Or even if there are actual BLT people in there, and it's got to be a side relationship, an ancillary relationship, because just most people just aren't on board with it. It doesn't matter why. It's like those are their belief systems. They may come from one of the Abrahamic religions, or they may come from various backgrounds, but their whole life experience led them to, oh, we have different beliefs. We're not into this kind of thing. And there's more to it than that. But, a lot of it is like, you look at the Hollywood types who are pushing this kind of stuff, and you see what their values are. And it's kind of a simple to say, well, like, yeah, anything you people are pushing is going to be evil, because, like, we see the kind of stuff. We see the stuff you applaud. And what's that quote? We see the stuff you applaud, and then we see the stuff you jeer. I think that's like some old Roman quote or something. Anyway, so the BLT stuff, I think, is the bigger issue, much more so than the race swap characters. For some reason, like, I don't accept that at all, which means I don't pay for Hollywood anymore, or I don't even want to see it for free, because I just can't see that kind of stuff. But a lot of people are fine with it, as long as it's not the main character getting swapped. And you look at some movie that did well, you're like, so every secondary character got race swapped. Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's not too. It's not woke because they didn't swap out the main character. You're like, okay, so Spider-Man or whatever the main character is, but every other character is swapped out. That's not the cartoon, the comic book. That's not the show. It's something else. You're watching somebody's version of propaganda, and in your mind, like you think it's not woke because like the main character still is. I mean, the whole thing is painful to watch people like not paying attention, but you know that's why we make these kind of videos. So the BLT stuff can't find an audience because it just doesn't make sense to straight people. Our minds just keep circling around in loops, trying to find the logical touchdown point, and it just never happens. We can't understand why two of the same characters would kiss each other, and we don't want to see it. We don't understand it. It's like we're not phobic. We don't hate it. We just don't understand it. It just doesn't make sense to us. Like I just think of it as like that spinning circle on a computer screen that it's trying to resolve a solution and it never happens. And the left wing like immediately ad hominems like, oh, you must be secretly this or that yourself, or you must be istophobic, or you must be like, no, I just explained it to you. It's like it's really not that deep. It's just not who we are. You're selling to a very small audience and they're not buying it. Even that they are not buying it. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. How long was this? Fuck, that was a long video. I didn't mean to go 20 minutes. Check out the subscribe star, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.